Skepticism.
Skepticism, yes.
Yeah.
I see it every day, as you know.
What are we going to say is actually really important. Repeat, repeat, repeat.
Sure, repeat. Location. We want to be in the economy of trust.
That means a new economic mechanism.
No, I see my future here. I feel it.
I love Ukraine.
My name is Henry Shterenberg. I'm a president of World Trade Center Kyiv, and you are on our new project, Economy of Trust. My guest today is Peter Atwood, a communication expert who has spent his career in public and private sector across many countries around the world. Today, I'm lucky that he is a chief communication officer for World Trade Center Kyiv. Our topic today will be all about communication, importance of communication for positioning, for delivering the message, for understanding of how critical communications are in 21st century. Peter, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
I'm really glad to be here. It's great to see you again.
Yes, and let's start with you. I know you have spent 20 years in your career as an entrepreneur in your business in Canada, and I want you to spend a couple of minutes about that and also why you moved on.
Right. So I started out with a publishing company. And I studied literature in university, love of words, and I guess now we call it communications. And that got me into publishing. And it wasn't until I was in publishing that I realized I was also an entrepreneur, because we set up a company. And I ran that for 10 years in Winnipeg on the prairies of Canada. I moved to Toronto, worked for a larger publishing company. And then I moved into more in the commercial sector, doing comms I was a content manager for an online startup, and eventually I started working around the world, and that was very much a freelance career, working for companies, for government, for all sorts of clients. When I returned to Canada for a while, I ended up working for the Government of Canada, and I was communications advisor with Global Affairs Canada, the equivalent of the State Department or the Foreign Office.
That's an important office.
Yes.
So let's talk about Canada, your position there. Obviously, one of the critical things that I was attracted to you as an expert, is because of your ability to move between the government communications and private corporate communications. Talk about the difference between the two.
Yeah. In government, there was a joke between some of the different government departments that, whenever a crisis happened somewhere in the world, right, the immigration department would work really hard and urgently and figure out what are we going to do. But global affairs would work really hard and fast and urgently to decide what are we going to say. Right,
the response to some kind of emergency or kind of event.
Military thing or environmental disaster or humanitarian disaster, whatever. And what are we going to say is actually really important.
Correct, of course. Key to communications, isn't it?
Yeah. And what I learned really and took on board from my time in government was just how to be reactive. Because
the corporate world is a more proactive approach, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
So that's the difference?
Yeah. Both require you to be prepared and to plan.
Right.
But in government, you're planning for contingencies.
Correct.
And in the corporate world, you're planning how you're going to go to market.
Great.
And
how do you position yourself?
How do you position yourself? And
what message you want to deliver to someone? Yeah.
In both cases, it always starts with who's the audience.
Correct.
And all communications start with understanding your audience. And if you don't start there, everything else falls apart.
Great segue to the next question. Obviously, you're here, as you alluded earlier, and I know that because of your wife's diplomatic career. That's why it's a great opportunity for you to travel the world. Ukraine, what's your impression? What do you think potential of the country is? What do you feel about the country compared to others?
I like the way you phrase that. I often get that question, you travelers, what do you like about the country where you are?
Right.
but how do you feel about it?
Right.
It's a different question.
It is.
And I've had this feeling once before. I love Ukraine. I think it has enormous potential. It's an exciting place to be culturally and in the business world right now. I had the fortune to be in Yerevan around
Armenia. Yes.
Yeah, 2004.
Okay.
So a short time frame after the wall came down
Yep.
and after it gained its independence. And you could see the falling Soviet structures, and you could see
monuments.
You could see that history. But on the street corners, there were restaurants popping up. There's underground bars with new music, and the feeling I felt like optimism, renewal.
Right.
And I feel the same thing here in
Ukraine.
Kyiv and Ukraine. It's a little different because everything is. There's a bigger infrastructure.
Bigger country, way bigger country, yes.
But the feeling is the same.
Right, a lot of energy. I mean, I personally, as somebody who was born here and spent most of my life in America, I come back and I always will pull back here. And now somebody asked me if I want to come back to America, and I said, no, I see my future here. I feel it. It's just a great opportunity professionally, personally, and I love this country. That leads me to the next question. Obviously, today, in your new role as a Chief Communication Officer for World Trade Center Kyiv, you are responsible for delivering a very important message, I believe, our vision of future economy of trust in Ukraine. So talk about the challenges and of the delivering that message to Ukrainian audience.
Wow, yeah. There are a number of challenges. And I would say the first one is skepticism.
Skepticism, yes.
Yes.
I see it every day, as you know.
The culture here and the different challenges that Ukraine has gone through means that most people, when they hear a good news story, they have a wait-and-see attitude.
Yes.
And so, the way we're going to tackle that, and as you know, because we've had this in planning meetings, we're going to deliver results, right? We're going to, and we already have results in the pipeline. And so we're going to start with a message. We're building the economy of trust, right? And what does that mean? That means a new economic mechanism for Ukraine, both for investors and for businesses, to get together and build...
United under one vision of sort.
Yes, and to build the things that Ukraine needs, strategically important, projects and development. But so we say that's what we're building, and that's the first message. But the next message is, hey, we're launching this product, and we're building the economy of trust.
It's part of the building blocks of economy.
And the next message, and the next message, and
so this is a systematic approach to giving here's where we're going, and then delivering result and communicating those both messages all the time across.
Right. And we want to, each time we have something to tell the public and the business world, the Ukrainian people, the international audience, every time we want to say, hey, we're delivering this, it's part of the economy of trust, and we can tell where it's going so that our next delivery says we're fulfilling that promise.
Correct. And this is important as part of building trust in itself.
Yeah.
Between us as a company, organization, and the audience, international in our case, and domestic.
Yeah. There's one other key aspect to it, and that's transparency.
100%, we know our rule.
Yeah.
But I want to stress and I want to point out one thing. Me and Peter had weeks of argument between we are economy of trust or we are building economy of trust. One word. And Peter obviously won this argument because we are not really an economy of trust yet. We want to be an economy of trust. And in communication, in terms of credibility, transparency, we need to be very precise. And building it is a correct word in this case because that's the future that we're aiming to achieve.
Right. And it also tells the world what our role is.
Obviously, you have spent your career traveling around the world. You have experienced many different cultures.
Yeah.
Being a Canadian, I want you to share with us how culturally somebody like you coming out of Canada digesting all type of differences, and how do you, as a professional, communicate through those?
Wow. Yeah, it's a great question. So I've been really fortunate that I've been able to work and travel around the world, partly because my wife is a diplomat and she's been dragging me from China to Egypt, now in Ukraine. And I've also been lucky that I've been able to work everywhere I've gone. Everyone needs communications, and in the international world, someone with North American English communications. So I've been really fortunate, and I found that in terms of the cultural differences, they are subtle, and they are really important,
critical,
and and the trick about it is being clear. And taking the time to be clear whenever you're communicating. And this is true for everything. You listen once, you listen twice, you listen 3 times until you understand it. Right. Whether it's an exchange on chat, it's on the phone, or you're preparing a document. In terms of the other cultural differences, they've just been an enriching experience.
Enriching for you personally, yes.
Yeah.
Because you learn so many more nuances that you know sitting on the internet.
Yes, and just the simple. I've learned a little bit of Arabic, a little bit of Korean, a little bit of Chinese. I'm learning
a lot of Ukrainian,
a lot of Ukrainian, and the simplest way to get all of them have different alphabets, and you could just spend 2 hours memorizing, learn the alphabet, and suddenly what you thought was a world that you couldn't understand, you start sounding out the letters. Half of them are based on English or French yes. or whatever. I mean, Korea, and I'm spending out, orange juice. Oh, I know what that is, And the other thing I've found is, I lived in Egypt twice.
Yeah.
The first time I was in and out. I traveled to Nepal. I attended a workshop in San Diego. I was there for 6 weeks. It was 9 months. So it
wasn't a permanent thing?
It wasn't. I was back and forth, and I never really integrated with sort of language, making friends and stuff. And that was my worst international experience.
Because of in and out
part. Because I didn't spend the time to learn about the culture and to connect with it. And to understand it more. And when I went back, I made that a priority. I'm going to spend some effort to learn the language more. I'm going to spend an effort to learn my local community.
Excellent. Uncomfortable question, and I want you to be completely transparent about it. You've been around the world. What are the stakeholders around Ukraine, other countries, people, corporations? What's the Ukraine's reputation in your view now?
There's a lot of ways to characterize that, and I'll be careful about my language, but it's not good, right?
Right.
The view is that if you're going to do business in Ukraine, you're taking a high level of risk.
Correct.
And that risk is really a fear of being ripped off, being cheated, facing corruption. Those are the risks.
Judicial system that doesn't work.
A judicial system where if I encounter a problem, there's no recourse.
Correct.
Right.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
And yes, and that's pervasive. And it's you only need 1 or 2 anecdotes, 1 or 2 stories of a businessman, and I know many of them, of Canadian investors,
yes,
who have
Americans all over the world,
and
Chinese,
yes, and the result of them trying to start something here in Ukraine is that they lost their money, and it wasn't because the project failed; it was because
systematic risks.
The partner in the situation here.
So let's take it to the next level.
Yeah.
One of the problems, in my view, in my experience in Ukraine, the Ukraine as a country, government of Ukraine, does not do anything to support its image through communications around the world. And What is our role now that we know that the government of Ukraine is not doing up to par job of positioning the country globally? Because geopolitically, we know it's a critical country, but yet on the business economic trust side, no communication whatsoever. So what do you see World Trade Center Kyiv can do in that role? Under your leadership, by the way.
Great stuff. You know, like the vision that you've shared with the team, you know, is about changing the country, not just building a World Trade Center. And that means we've got a huge role. And I see us succeeding because the way change happens in any organization, within a society, within a family, within a business, top-down doesn't work. But if there's a core group of people who identify the problem and see it as an urgent crisis, and when you see it as an urgent crisis, you work outside the system. You find a way to get your solution. You get a solution, other people see you succeeding, they join, and that grows to become the new culture, to be the new norm. That's how organizations, companies change. That's what we're doing here in Ukraine. We're that seed, and we are going to operate we're going to create an environment of trust for business and commerce and trade, and we are going to have successes, and we are going to be loud and proud about those successes, and we are going to create a coalition that's going to grow and change the country.
Excellent. But we also, a part of what we're doing in this, our strategy, and the reason the communication department was in World Trade Center was more or less first department as formed as a department, because I understood how critical it is. We're also coming out with a bunch of products in the near future. Director is one of them coming next week, already into the public. Obviously, those products are communication tools. So talk about the importance of the products itself as part of our overall communication strategy.
Right. So, well, there's one thing I've learned in my career. You know, we're supposed to be, and I started in the 90s when I formed my publishing company, and so I watched the internet, you know, actually turn into what it is, and all the phrases from way back then, information superhighway, we're in, you know, the information economy and all that. What does that mean? And what I've learned over time is that means people say communication is vital, and you recognize this. But in practical terms, communication is implementation. If you're not thinking about communicating, how you're going to communicate something, you're not thinking about how it's actually going to be implemented or run in the real world.
Yes.
And when you say all our products, and the reverse is now true as well.
Correct. It's all tied in both ways.
When you implement a new product, like the directory and some of the other ones we have to deal with the judicial system, to deal with certifying companies so that they can...
Concierge services we're building.
It's... those products are...
Become our face, isn't it?
They're communication tools, absolutely.
We're clearly living in the interconnected world, I can say, globally now. COVID pandemic showed us how connected we are. And internal communication for governments, communications. Recently, I came back from Berdyansk. Then I have a communication officer. At least I didn't know his name or her name. So talk about importance of communication in today's technological world.
Wow. So focusing on internal communications, we as World Trade Center Kyiv are, you know, living this.
Correct.
Because of COVID, and also because of, you know, the startup nature of what we're doing, and everyone's working remotely, and the dynamics are really different. So one of the things that I've encouraged all of us to do, as you know, is we've created groups for us to chat, and we ask everyone to communicate as much as possible in that group rather than communicating one-on-one.
So instead of usual emails, and we have now chats for every department that we can talk about different subject matters and not overwhelm anyone.
But even if I'm just talking to you directly and it's a message from you to Henry, we'll do it in the chat where it's appropriate so the other people can see it.
Correct.
And that sort of substitutes...
So transparency, internal transparency.
Internal transparency. And it substitutes for what happens sort of naturally when you're all in the same office. You overhear,
Correct.
you see three guys go into the boardroom and, oh, they must be having a meeting about... So it's all that...
So do you see a radical change in internal communications that are happening now?
Yes, because you have to make an effort to reproduce those ambient, contextual types of communication that you get when you're all in an office together. You have to find ways to reproduce it.
Right.
Virtually.
It's hard.
It's hard. So Clay Shirky, he's one of the first sociologists to study internet culture and so on. His first book was called Here Comes Everybody, and a great title. But he has realized that all the problems that we've identified with, social media and other things, the way they're disrupting modern life, it's usually because there was a filter to communications that the real world imposed on us that we took for granted and we didn't realize. And then we go on Facebook and you say you're breaking up with your girlfriend and the whole world knows it.
Yes, yes.
And suddenly you're dealing with a whole communications issue you didn't have to deal with in the real world.
Correct.
Because you would break up with your girlfriend and
a couple of people would know.
And only a couple of people would know. And it's a problem of filters.
Yes.
So recreating those filters or recreating where those filters disappear in the virtual world.
Excellent.
It's key.
The last part of our conversation,
Sure.
always with everyone we are doing the interview is blitz questions. I'm going to go rapid questions, right?
I'm ready.
We're calling
I'm
it
ready.
America. Russia or Ukraine?
Ukraine.
All right, Ukraine or Canada? Setting you up.
There's a phrase that
Is it?
says Canada, Ukraine, one country, two continents.
Great. I love that. That's a great answer. Maple syrup or Ukrainian borscht?
Maple syrup, sorry.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Seriously? Okay. What's your biggest success in communications? Yet to come? World Trade Center Kyiv? I'm just kidding.
You know what? That is actually true. This is the biggest opportunity I've had in my career, and I'm going to make it my biggest success.
All right. What's your biggest communication failure?
My biggest communication failure. Does that have to be in business?
Doesn't matter. It's your answer.
Yeah. I'm thinking.
Remember, it's a rapid questions and rapid answers.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to be really honest. 2 divorces in my life.
Yes.
Communication failure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great answer. 3 key points for communication. Just 3.
3. Know the audience. From that, know how to reach the audience. What are they looking at, reading? And then 3, your message to get to that audience, short.
To the point.
Repeat.
Short, repeat. Location.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, economy of trust as a message. What does it mean to you, and how does it potentially can change Ukraine?
Okay, short answer for that. Economy of trust is a great vision. And I think we've talked about it being a seed that's going to grow and change the country. For me, it's unleashing the potential of Ukraine.
And it leads to my last question. Always finish with that question. For you, what is Ukraine?
Oh, man. For me, Ukraine is a whole bunch of experiences, and it's like I'm a sponge. I'm soaking up the experiences, and it's changing me.
Well, thank you very much. To summarize this great conversation with Peter, I want everybody to understand the communication, irrespective if you're a small city, if your corporation or your government, is critical in today's world. Without proper communication strategy, there's absolutely no chance your company can succeed, or your government can succeed, or your city. We are lucky to have Peter as a Chief Communication Officer for World Trade Center Kyiv, because his role is not only to help our organization, but to help millions of organizations within Ukraine, non-for-profit and for-profit, and municipalities of different types. The question for you is this: how do you communicate? What can we do together to help you communicate better? Hope you sign up for our channel and hope to see you next time. And thank you very much for watching us today. Have a great day.